Hey everyone, welcome to the Oaks Church Worship at Home. Just kidding, we're not doing that right now. Thankfully, we're meeting in person. But I did want to take some time just to walk you through a tool that is called the 5 Stages of Discipleship. It comes from a book called Disciple Shift, a very catchy title. This book has been really helpful for me, so I hope that you will pick it up if you're interested in learning more about discipleship. I'm showing you this because I feel like it's a helpful supplement to just the discipleship talk that we had on Sunday in that sermon, and yet going through something this complex on a Sunday morning is just not the right fit. And so I wanted to give you this so that you could talk about it in your missional community, so that you could think about it as you're moving kind of along this path as a disciple of Jesus. And also because we're going to be rolling something out in the fall called Next Steps, which will kind of be like our one-on-one discipleship curriculum as a church that will just kind of help maintain the culture of our church and continue to grow our church and being highly missional and being culturally engaging and yet still theologically solid and being a church that's highly relational and authentic. Because if we want to be able to grow and yet still maintain who the Oaks is in a faithful way, we need tools like this. And so I just want to explain this to you in the next 5 minutes or so, and then kind of walk you through what I hope this does for us as a church family. There are 5 stages of discipleship here that are characterized by dead, infant, children, young adult, parent. And so you probably recognize those are kind of the stages of someone's walk with Jesus. Before you come to Christ, you are dead. You're dead in your trespasses and sins. And yet once you're born again, you become an infant in the faith. You grow in your infancy into a child, and you become a young adult, and then ultimately a parent who's going to reproduce, to make more disciples. And so I want to walk you through, hey, if you're discipling someone and you recognize what stage they're in, what are your next steps? If you're discipling someone and you don't know what stage they're in, how do you figure that out? Well, I hope to just share this with you and try to simplify some of those complex things and yet answer some of those questions. So if someone is dead in their sin, what is your role? Well, this outside circle says share the gospel with them. Share the gospel in a way that is winsome, in a way that is truthful, in a way that is intentional. Now, how do you know if someone is dead in their sin? Well, they're characterized by unbelief. They're not believing in the gospel. They're not trusting Jesus for their sins. They're trusting something else. They have no hope, and so they're characterized by unbelief. Now, hopefully, as you share the gospel with them, they will be born again. And if they're born again, then they become an infant in the faith. Well, how do you know someone is an infant in the faith? Well, they're characterized by ignorance. So they just don't know what they don't know. They don't know what sin is. They don't know certain beliefs about who Jesus is. And so what is your role to that person? It is to share your life with them so that they can see how a Christian lives, to share new truth with them so they can know what a Christian believes, and to share new habits with them so that they can know how does a Christian spend their time and engage with God through prayer, through Bible reading. You want to share those habits with that person. Now, by God's grace, they'll grow from an infant into a child. Now, how do you know if someone is a child in the faith? Well, just like most children in an age as a child, they're self-centered. And so what do you do when someone is a child in the faith? You want to connect them to purpose. You want to say, hey, I've noticed you're really good at this, and I think this is how God could have wired you to serve him, that Ephesians 2:10 kind of thing. You want to connect them to a small group or family. One of the best ways for us to not be self-centered is to be in a family of people where we're constantly thinking about the needs of others. And third, you want to connect them to God. So really the goal here is to connect them to God so that they're not as self-centered. They learn that this is really more about God's glory than it is about me. As they begin to grow in these things, they'll become a young adult in the faith. Now, how do you know someone is a young adult in their faith? Well, they're now characterized by God-centeredness. So they've figured this out. Other-centeredness. They've become a part of a family, maybe growing into a church family or a missional community group, and now they're connected to service. So they know God's purpose for them. What do you do if you're discipling someone who is a young adult in the faith? You train them to minister. And so you release them to do ministry. You provide ministry opportunities for them, and you equip them for ministry. So you're saying, hey, this is a great podcast to listen to, a sermon that you need to hear, or a book you need to read, or a blog I wanted to share with you. You want to provide ministry opportunities. Hey, these are the teams that our church has. This is how you can get connected as an apprentice to a missional community group. and then you release them to do ministry. Hey, I think God's gifted you to do this. Let's get you on that track to serving weekly, monthly, whatever that looks like for you. Now, as a person grows kind of in this process from young adult, they will become a parent. How do you know if someone is a parent in their faith? Well, they're now characterized by intentionality and strategy. And so they're intentional about the way that they spend their time, about who they spend their time with. They're kind of looking around and saying, man, who's an infant in their faith? Who's a child in their faith that I could kind of bring along with me? And there's a strategy to help those people grow. So what do you want to do whenever you see that someone is a parent in their faith? You want to explain the discipleship process. You want to do exactly what I'm doing right now. Oaks Church, I'm doing what I'm doing right now because I believe that every member is a missionary and also that every member is equipped to make disciples. I believe whenever I'm speaking to our church members, I'm speaking to disciple makers. And so I'm trying to be faithful to this first step and explain this to you because I know that our church is continuing to grow and there will be more people that you get to come alongside and help mature in their faith. The next step is to release to disciple another with your help. And so you say, hey, I've been discipling you for a while, walking through this process with you. Do you think we invite one more person in and I kind of help you lead the process of growth for this person? And then finally, you release that person to disciple alone. You say, look, I've seen you grow a lot. I think that it's time that maybe we part ways so that you can go and disciple a couple more people and I can disciple a couple more people. And in that way, you have started this process over again so that that person can go and make disciples as you continue to make disciples. And so this is kind of the 5 stages of discipleship. I recognize this is kind of more evangelism than discipleship, but it's called the 5 stages of discipleship, so that's how I'm presenting it to you. I want you to know that our heart in developing a curriculum around this that we're kind of calling it Next Steps, or a course rather, we really don't know what to call it, but basically it's a way to pass on what it means to be a disciple at the Oaks Church. Someone who is both culturally engaging and yet theologically grounded, someone who is highly relational, highly intentional, really generous. And so we've basically begun to structure the bones of a 6-week process where one-on-one discipleship can happen between current members and incoming members, people who maybe are going through a rocky time in their faith or just kind of stagnant time in their faith, or really just kind of saying, you know what, I've been a Christian for a long time, but I really need a tool that will help me disciple others. So right now, I took a couple weeks back in December to kind of write the bones of that curriculum. And now me and Kyle Mack and a couple other people are working on creating that so that in the fall, we can roll this out so that as our church continues to grow, the culture of the Oaks as a church that just wants to bring restoration through the gospel, that's all about the gospel, continues to stay the same even as our church multiplies and gets larger. And so I hope this is helpful to you. Now, I want you to know that I recognize this is extremely simplistic. I just walked through that process. And so in my own life, I recognize I'm a parent in some places, and yet I still feel like a child in others. And so that's okay. This is more of just kind of a approach that says, hey, where are you mainly at, and how can you use this as a way to make more disciples? So I hope this has been helpful. Now you probably understand why I didn't try to walk through all of this on a Sunday afternoon during our church service. But I hope this is helpful and hope that it's something that just kind of stirs really good conversation in your missional community groups and among our church. Thanks.